Hey, welcome to Expat Diaries podcast. I can't tell you how excited I am for this conversation today with Tony Lewis. We got to chat a little bit yesterday, and I got to know more about him and his story and his amazing business that he has. But the fascinating thing for me, as always, with you guys is to take you on the journey. It doesn't look like what you think it's going to look like. When you decide that you're going to move to another country, everybody's journey is different. And it just really depends on if you're willing to stick it out, if you're willing to commit to this way of life, if you're willing to see what the future holds for you in the new place that you selected. And Tony embodies all of that. So without any further ado, welcome Tony Lewis from RadPad.
Wow. Thank you for that intro. That was amazing. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I'll tell you that after we got off the phone yesterday, I spent some time. I was on your, I went to your website, so radpad.com, and I was watching your videos, and I was learning all about how to build a RadPad and the panels and the recyclable stuff. And there was so much cool stuff there. And we will get to that later in this podcast. But I want to start out with what I always start out with everybody. So you're an American.
Right.
Yes. And so I always am curious about the journey. Like I'm sitting in the United States or I'm sitting in Canada and my life is going along swimmingly. And one day I went, what the crap? Let's go down here and see what this is all about. And I know that Costa Rica was not your first stop. So let's go from that San Fran, Colorado, British Columbia jaunt that looks probably nothing like the life you have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely have several lives I've lived, and this is a new chapter for sure, and it's like nothing else in my book. So yeah, wow. Where exactly do you want me to start on that? And I'll jump in for you. But
I think we could probably start with you were in a successful career in British Columbia, right?
Right. Yeah. So I did the music for 15 years or so, and I was doing that pretty successfully. And then first baby came along. Then I got into the wine business, and I was doing that pretty successfully. I found my niche was getting into I'm going to just let this there it goes. There's a few trucks in Costa Rica that drive by my house. So every once in a while, we might have one go by. But yeah, I got into the marketing of wine, and I'd always been really interested in the psychology of people, like what makes you want this versus wanting that, and that sort of stuff. So I was doing marketing for a really cool guy back in Canada. He had 9 wineries, and it was super sweet. So I asked him if I could take a vacation. We took our tax return, and we came to Nicaragua. We just looked for a cheap, warm, safe place to go. And it popped up, not that place. It said, this is the not place to go. And we've been a little adventurous. A couple of years back, we went to Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and did a little work on an orphanage over there. And it was after that, it was man, we don't have to go to all-inclusives. We can go places in the world. And then we started doing Mexico, but on chicken buses and taking the kids and just really experiencing culture, not just the weather. So we came to Nicaragua, and right when I landed, I had a little Evie. That's my youngest daughter. She was 6 months at the time. So she was strapped to my chest, and we just hit the streets hard, and we'd be walking around, and I'd see so many opportunities. It blew my mind. So I was working as a marketer online. I had about a whole lot of Shopify websites and managing inventory and that sort of stuff for wineries, which is kind of complicated, but once you understand it, it's a cool niche to be in.
So
I did that for a while.
So how did you decide? So Nicaragua is not some tiny little country. So you decided to go to Nicaragua, and then how did you decide where to go in Nicaragua?
So, when I was in Canada, it was in the winter. It was cold. The wine business is it's kind of lame during that time. It's much more fun. And the romance of wine is when the vines are there and harvest time and all that. This is winter. So I was just binging on everything I could get on YouTube. And when I typed in Costa Rica, it was too much. There was so much content that I couldn't get a grasp on it. But in Nicaragua, there was nothing. So I'm wow, maybe I could, do marketing there. I think I could kick these guys' asses. That's kind of what I was thinking. And I started watching everything I could. And I just wanted to see it for real. Like, was it really that inexpensive from where I was in Canada, in Kelowna, British Columbia? It's kind of one of the more expensive places in Canada, to go to Nicaragua, where it was like, really, you can get a hotel room for $30, really? And yeah, you can. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So you guys land, and you find your way to whatever hotel you had already booked.
Yeah.
Or did you hotel or did you B&B?
Airbnb.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had a house lined out for like how long?
2 days.
For 2 days. And then you're going to decide from there, like what's next?
Yeah, we had 30 days. Our plane returned in 30 days. And it was right before COVID started. So we didn't have like masks, or nobody was wearing masks in the airport or anything. And it was just like normal. And there was like a bat in China that was like made somebody sick. That's what I knew about it. And then we flew over there. 2 days we stayed in an Airbnb, which was like, the pictures online were not what we stayed in. It was a very big culture shock right away, but we enjoyed it. We enjoyed the culture shock. Yeah.
So we're the same way. Like when we travel, like I think I've once in my entire life, and I don't even know if I remember when it was, stayed at an all-inclusive. Like I've always been so interested in experiencing the culture of the country and not be in a Marriott somewhere that I could be in Texas and it'd be just the same, because, you're inside of a resort. You're kind of bound by that resort because you have your little wristband on, and that's where you can eat and drink. And if you go outside of there, it's going to cost you more, and you paid so much for this all-inclusive. Don't venture off the property. And so we've never done that, especially never in Costa Rica. Like we came in, the first time we came over in Guanacaste, and we rented a B&B, somebody's house over in Playa Garza. And we've just done that every time we've come down here, is like stayed in a home and been either house sit for somebody or been in a home within a community, and really I've never even stayed at any of the touristy spots, which what Jaco and Tamarindo. Like I've never stayed in any of those spots when I've came down to Costa Rica ever.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's what I would recommend to anybody traveling anywhere.
For sure.
In Canada, it was very common, the wine, what do you call them? The winos. Yeah. So like all the people who had wineries and were involved in the wine clubs and all that would do all inclusive. So it was like, everybody's doing it. So I did it for like 3 years. And on the third year, I was like, this sucks.
Yeah.
Like the wine's bad, the food's bad, the beer's bad, everything's bad, but it's just enough, where it's warm. We walked to the beach, So the third time we went, we just walked up to the gate and we're like, we're out of here. Let's just go out of the gate. And it was like that scene in the Truman Show.
Yeah.
Because it was like, they're all telling us like bad things are going to happen out there. And we're just like, but we can't take it anymore. We have 4 more days in this 9-day all-inclusive. And it's just like, so we walked out, and then we got a $50 a day rental car. And no, we rented the car at the all-inclusive, which they were like, are you sure you want to do this? Are you sure? We don't have insurance, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, yes, I want to do it. I'm going. Give me the car. I got the car. We drive out, and they warned us about the gas, make sure it's at 0. They're going to try and scam you. And so we go down the road, and then on the right-hand side, there was a thing that said cenotes. And we pull over on the right, and it's this person's house.
Yeah.
And it's like a mom and stuff, and she runs out, and then she makes us some chicken on a fire, and we're like, this is awesome.
Yeah.
And she took us in the back of her little Jimmy Jeep, drove us into the jungle. We saw a baby black freaking puma.
Wow.
Run across, and she's like, that's why we had the machete. I was like, rad, scary but rad. I just got out of the all-inclusive, seeing a freaking puma. And then it gets dark, and we're out there, and we're at this big tree, and she says, go down. And I'm like, really? All right, what's down? And I'm staring down there, and I'm like, what is it? And then she throws a rock in, and the water was all there. I could see straight through the water, like way deep. And we got to swim in it, like moonlight and all that. And she wanted like $5, It was amazing. And then when I got back to the inclusive, I told everybody there, I was the like the antichrist for the all inclusive. I was like, we can go out there. You can go get like tacos for nothing and have a blast. So then we just started going out. And after that, I'll never, ever put myself through that type of situation again.
Yeah. It's amazing the difference in your vacation experience. So a good friend of mine had asked me, like, after we had been to Costa Rica so many times, and he was like going, "Hey, my wife and I want to go to Costa Rica, and I want to meet with you and get some ideas about, where to go and what to do." And I'm like, okay. So then they asked my husband, and they were like asking him his opinion. And so Brian is not controversial at all. Like, if he thinks that you really want to eat that red pill and he knows the blue pill is better for you, but you really want to eat the red pill, he's just going to encourage you to eat the red pill. He's just who he is. And so they're like, yeah, we found this all inclusive in Tamarindo and we're like so excited. And it's blah, 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 blah. And so they come back and they had a horrible vacation. Like they were on a black sand beach and they couldn't walk out there because it burned their feet so bad. And nobody told them they had to take their shoes to the beach. And it was just, the whole thing was horrible. And I'm like, where did you go? And they're going, well, we went to this all inclusive. We talked to Brian about it. I'm like, oh my God, why'd you talk to Brian? Like, what? You should have just called me. And so it was super funny. And I was just like, I can't imagine experiencing this amazing country or even Central America. I can't imagine experiencing it through the eyes of some corporate hotelier.
Wow.
I just can't.
Well, being in Nicaragua, so I was there the first 4 years where I don't know where we were in the story. It's Airbnb. And then from there, then COVID kind of started getting real. And it was like people just started leaving Nicaragua. And it was like, there's a lot of cool vacancies and it's cheap. So we still had like maybe 2 weeks left by the time like COVID was a thing.
Yeah.
And then we found all very similar to an all-inclusive. To be honest, it was a gated community with about 1,000 people that live in there. It's in the Tola region, and it's where most of the wealth of Nicaragua lives in this. There's like 3 or 4 gated communities: Guacalito, Rancho Santana, Hacienda Iguana, and that's pretty much it. Those 3, and we got in one, and it was a lot better than an all-inclusive because everybody left. At one point, we started a Facebook group in there. There was 37 people living in there. 37 people. So out of the 2,000 people, everybody left. And all these beachfront mansions. Dude, I rented houses that movies are made in for $800. I never paid more than $800 a month.
Wow.
And it was like, we had 2 nannies. It was crazy. Like, it was lap of luxury life.
Did you ever watch Last Man on Earth?
No.
Oh my God, that series is so funny because it's kind of the same concept.
Yes,
right?
I did. I totally did.
And so he's like living in all of these huge mansions. Like, he stole the rug from the Oval Office. Like, and he's living in these huge, huge mansions because there's nobody in them.
Yeah. That was me. That was literally me. Yeah, it was amazing. It was a great experience. Like I say, I was like, COVID rocks. This is amazing. All the restaurants would deliver me food, and it was like, this is great. As long as somebody can pay the bills, this is awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know when we talked yesterday, you talked about like we were only going to stay like 6 months and kind of ride the COVID thing out. Right. And then it went on longer than any of us anticipated, obviously. And so at what point did you go, hey, this is probably going to be more permanent?
Yeah, so that was probably about like 6 months. We had arrived right on the right time with the school being out and like whatever. So it wasn't a school pressure thing because we had 3 kids. They were like 1, 11, and 13. Mm-hmm. So that's 4 years ago. So they're a little bigger now, something like that. And we had to find a private school for them. So we were I'm a much changed person. So I'm coming to you as marketing guy, like fancy cars and big homes, to now me, which is, we'll get into, quite different than then. So I needed the kids to have a school that would give them a U.S. diploma. I needed a lot of boxes had to be checked. So we found a private school there. And that's really when the prices really started jacking up. It was like, dang, this is not cheap to live here. We wound up paying for the kids per school. And it was like, I want to say it was like $500 each a month.
Wow.
To go to school there, so it added up and really quick. Yeah, it got up there. So they were going to school in another gated community. So I drove out of the gates, down the street, into the other gates, dropped the kids off, out of the gates, back. And that was my life for a little while. But then COVID got more hardcore and they shut the school and made it online. So we basically learned online schooling, which was fantastic. I mean, my kids were able to bang out school in 2 hours a day.
I'm sure.
And they had the rest of the day to if they wanted to be awesome and go outside and play.
Yeah.
So
then at that point you like, no, like it's permanent. So are you still working online from Nicaragua?
No, that's interesting. So like at that point, about 30 days in, maybe 60 days in, 60 days, I had this like come to Jesus moment where I was like, wow, I just basically kind of manipulate people into buying shit they don't need. That's my job.
That's
right?
marketing.
Yeah. And I'm living this life where I'm getting pulled into like minimalism. I'm getting pulled into like seeing it from a different angle.
So there's a conflict. There's a conflict within your psyche at this point.
Totally. And I'm not feeling like I'm being honest with myself. So I call up Buddy and I'm like, dude, I can't do it anymore. And he's, no problem, bro. Like times are crazy right now. Everything's fine. So then my mother-in-law started sending us some money to be able to pay the bills while we stayed there, because we were going to come back to Canada and get a job and do all that. But COVID kept going. So I picked up a few, like I was a business coach for a couple guys, I did business coaching. I did marketing again, which is ironic for an MLM company doing CBD. So it was like, I was building the marketing program for them. I wasn't actually marketing to people. And for some reason I felt okay with that. So I was doing that, but just very odd end jobs, really, before I kind of dove in and really said, I'm going to stay here. I got to figure it out. Yeah.
And so when you guys were in British Columbia, did your wife work also?
Sometimes a little bit. Sometimes she worked in like the school. She would get a job in the school. Sometimes she would get a job like babysitting or nannying. She had a job maybe at a flower store a couple times, but not like I was making six figures. I was able to support the family.
Right. So it's not a career that she walked away from.
No.
Okay.
No. Yeah.
Okay. So now, like you guys are dedicated, we're staying here. COVID's still going, not going back to British Columbia. You probably couldn't have got in anyways. I think.
Yeah, it was over. They said, you're not allowed to come back. I was like, forget it. Let's stay.
Yeah. So then what was life like in Nicaragua during the rest of that time that you guys were there?
Well, there were a few gnarly events that happened. I see a lot in Nicaragua. People come, and there's two basic people that I've learned over the years that I can quickly differentiate between the two. One is somebody, and there's more. That's what I love about Costa Rica, is they're more of the first type, which is the type of person that still uses the system back in North America and the money system to generate income, and then they live the lifestyle over here.
Right.
And that's very different than a lot of the other type of person I classify, is where they sold their house, they quit their job, they sold their couch, their car, their everything they could. They sold it all, and for the first time in their life, they got $250,000. They've never had this much money before, and they got it. And they're like, I'm going to live forever on that in Nicaragua. And it's like, well, that's not my experience. My experience in Nicaragua was $90,000 the first year. That's how much I spent. So the idea that you could live forever on that, it's a psychological thing. And my marketing was like, it was so much, it wasn't fun, but I was intrigued to learn more about how this mindset happens. So in the beginning, they arrive in Nicaragua and they're like, wow, dinner's $4. I'll buy everybody dinner. And the feeling of abundance is so wonderful and beautiful that you're just like, everybody gets everything, right? But then after the end of the month, it's like, wow, everything's so cheap, but how did I spend $6,000? Like what happened, And the thing is, every day when you have a set amount of money and you don't have income generating, every day is kind of worse than the day before. And you go from abundance to scarcity. And as soon as you go into scarcity, fear kind of takes over in all of your thought process. We had talked about manifestation, and you're unable to manifest. You can be, you're hitchhiking, saying to yourself, nobody's going to pick me up there. It's too hot, Well, I believe that the raddest person I ever met is going to pick me up, and they're going to totally want a RadPad,
Mm-hmm.
And I get a ride. So when the two types of people I found, the one lives in scarcity because they sold everything and they're trying to, they've never actually budgeted that big, because every month they could mess up in 30 days. Like me, I'd mess up in 30 days and then boom, I got more money again. And then boom, I get more money again, you know?
Right.
So those are the two different types of people I noticed here. And I was quickly becoming the scarcity guy.
Right. Well,
Yep.
and the thing is with that too, is that they talk about, the people who talk about this stuff, they talk about like, so when you have a goal, so let's say that your goal is to make $100,000 in a year, right? Like now you're on that path of making $100,000, or you are at one lump sum or whatever. And once you get it, then you go into, how do I keep this $100,000? How do I not lose it? Right. And your mind shift changes. And instead of going, oh, but on this next thing, I want to make 150,000. Instead of going to that next level, you go into securing and making sure that what you just worked so hard to achieve, that you don't lose. And you forget how you acquired it to begin with, was because you manifested it, you visualized all of the things, and then you go into the whole old behaviors that you were in before you started learning a new way of thinking. And you're right. Like I'm constantly looking for, so we have this thing, my business partner and I do, like every time I'm outside walking, I'm looking for money. I'm just looking for it. And I find it most of the time. And when we get it, we do this stupid thing. It's so stupid, but you have to feel it in your chest, right? It's like when Patrick Mahomes throws that last touchdown pass, right? And you're like screaming on the side of your couch, oh my God, you're just yelling, right? Because you're so excited and you can feel it in your chest. Everybody in the house is yelling. When we find a penny on the street anywhere, we pick it up and go, big money. Oh my God, big money. And we're like so excited to have that penny. And then I give her whatever money I found and she gives me whatever money she found. And we just are so excited over those 3 cents or a quarter. And when it's a quarter, we're like, oh my God, did you see what I found today?
That's amazing.
The feeling of excitement over having found that is what's so important. And I tell her just on the other side of it too, like when you worry about money, the feeling that you have inside is the magnet that brings whatever it is you're worrying about straight back to you. So you've got to release the feeling. You can think about it and go, like, I probably need to make a strategy for this thing right here, for this part of the budget. I probably need to strategize for that. But the minute you start having feelings and stress about that thing, you're doomed. You're just doomed financially to this thing happening, the thing that you're worrying about, the future you. And I have to tell her all the time, look, that's future Beverly's problem. That is not today Beverly's problem. Today Beverly is excited. Do you live in plenty today? Do you have food and a roof and you have all the money in the bank that you need today to make it through today? And she's like, yes. I'm like, see now, today Beverly is perfect. Yeah. Let's don't borrow from future Beverly.
Totally.
So it's interesting that you say that because I can see people coming down with that mindset, because you're right. They sell everything they have and they've never had $250,000 in cash in their bank account somewhere, and have never had to learn to live like that. Right. And to go, how can I use this money to make more money?
See, that's where I'd say I learned here. Like really, I really believe I've learned this is, so once the online jobs kind of wore out and it was like, this sucks, what can I do? I started a wine bar. So I got a couple of partners and we built construction, did a wine bar, had a swimming pool, palapas. It was awesome. It was called Dubs. It was killer. It was right in the right spot where all the people that had money, but it was during COVID and there were no people. So it kind of just pittered out after a couple of months. We were like, it's not gonna, we worked really hard. It was an amazing experience. It was one of the coolest wine, but I built a lot of wineries and this was one of the coolest ones I ever built, and wow, but there's no people. So one thing or another, we decided to close that up and move on. Then a lot of different events happened. And what I learned from all this stuff, I wound up in building a restaurant, and then I wound up building a house, and then RadPads and all that. It was that I was trying to solve problems that people had, and I had a lease to own car business was my first one, trying to help expats get cars in Nicaragua. You have to start a corporation to buy it, blah, blah, blah. It's really challenging. So I thought I could help them with that. Then I started trying to help people with immigration, registration, and all that sort of stuff. And what I've learned was the biggest problem that people have being an expat is generating income. That's the number one thing. So then I took my business that was building houses for people, because I determined building in Nicaragua is the challenge. It's like, it takes forever. It costs more. It doesn't turn out how you like. That's the hardest thing. It's not the car. It's not the immigration. It's not the wine. It's not the food. It's the house. And then I came to this realization that it's not even the house. The reason that all these expats are leaving is because they go into scarcity and they can't generate income and they leave. So what I needed to do was flip my mindset on this house into how can I make the house an asset that generates income? Right. And that was like the moment where it was like, whoa, everything is about, yeah, man, you make $100,000. Awesome, dude. I remember the first time I made $100,000 in a year, and it was like, wow. What I didn't do was buy assets that generate cash. Right. That's what I should have done. Instead of buying a nice car, I should have bought 2 cars and rented one out or something, like come up with some way of buying something that not like holding real estate and waiting 10 years and selling it. That's awesome. That's one thing for the big boys or the big players to do. But for me right now, I need something that generates cash.
Cash flow. Cash flow is king.
Cash flow is king. Like, yeah, inventory and cash flow. Those are the two that have killed all of the businesses that I've tried that didn't work out. It was like either I had too much inventory, not enough inventory, too much cash flow, or no cash flow. They worked out like that. So yeah, so we switched it around, and now the building process that we developed for RadPad is it's readily available materials is all we use. We learned importing, exporting, getting specialty stuff. It's a disaster. I've seen the disaster too many times. So readily available stuff. And we built a system for building that makes it semi-modular so that we can build a house in 10 to 30 days. And what that does is originally we were like trying to build a house for somebody. And I built a house for somebody before. It's a very emotional process. Like I'm almost their therapist the whole time, whether the door opens in or out. It's such a big decision. And it is. It's your house. It's your home. It's where you're going to make
people will get divorced over building a house together. Like I told my husband, I'm not doing it. From doorknobs to what color are the hinges to all of the minutia.
Totally. It never ends. So I was like, I don't want to get involved in that. And I think the house problem isn't a problem. All they need is enough money and you can do whatever you want with your house, but to keep cash flow. So that's when we said our system for building is so fast. What it is about people who want to make investments in land and have that land return cash flow right away. So if you buy some land and you put a traditional house on it, it costs a bit more than a RadPad, but it takes time to build it before you can see the cash come back. So we knew we were on to like something pretty big once we realized that we had a speed that was untouchable at a price that was totally right. If you like numbers, I love numbers. Right. So I love doing a yearly ROI. I love that. That's what I love. It's like, what's the ROI on that? The investment and all that. So with RadPad, we quickly shifted, and then we were in Nicaragua, right? For like 6 months, we figured this out. We figured it out. We're like, wow, you can lease land and we can do this stuff and it's great. But there were no customers because the people that the expats that came to Nicaragua were the type of person that sold everything and ran away from the country. Never using you again. We're done. We're living this new life, Well, to invest and buy assets that you need money, right? Mm-hmm. So when I came to Costa Rica, I was like, oh my God, these guys are totally of a different breed. They're down here using the United States. Yes. They're not like putting the middle finger up and saying, we're never using you again. We're like going hippie or whatever. They're saying, I'm going to use those dudes to be able to live like this champion here in Costa Rica. And after my little recon trip down here, I sold everything in Nicaragua, all of our assets, anything that wasn't directed towards sales, made our office a mini office so we could keep our, corporation, and got a backpack and came down here.
Yeah. So capitalism isn't a bad thing, and people want to talk about it like it's a dirty word, but really, I am a capitalist myself. Like I know that there's a way to take what So I also believe that we're all put here to create something, right? And sometimes you don't find out what it is until later in life, but whatever you're creating is what somebody in the world is looking for. And they've said, oh my God, if I just had this thing, right? So nobody just has an uninspired thought. Tony, you didn't have an uninspired thought for RadPad, right? Somebody in the world was like, look, this is so frustrating. If there was just an easier process, if there was just an easier way for me to get an abode, a domicile, a place to live or a place to make money in Costa Rica, and like threw it out to the universe. And then some idea dropped in your head, right? And like, you were like, you took action, right? Whereas I may have had that idea and I'm like, there's too much shit in my head right now. I'm not taking that action, right? But as long as there is a need out in the universe and out in the world for the thing that creatively just dropped in your brain, there will be more customers than you can possibly chase down because you took action, because you did the thing. And I want to talk more about RadPad, but I want to go back for just a little bit and I want to talk about your sobriety journey. And it all sounds really, really good right now, but there was a really dark period that you went through. And I don't think that you anticipated it. And I don't know that you ever in your life thought that you would be in the situation that you were in.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I've had a pretty privileged life, and I'd say I've been pretty entitled most of my life. And I found fulfillment from people clapping for me, basically. Like once I played drums on stage the first time and people clapped, I was like, well, I want more of that, And then it was like, all I want to do is play music and have people clap at me. And that was the goal of life. So I got fulfillment by other people clapping. And then with that, I was never like, it was fulfillment, but it was so temporary. It was so temporary. And then I started, alcohol came along with the music. It was like such a perfect mix, right? Because it's like you play music at bars, everybody's drinking, so I'll drink too. And not that I'm blaming it on the environments at all. It's just I found myself manifesting environments where it was acceptable for me to drink and nobody care or matter. So with the band, I started. That's when I didn't realize I had an allergy. I now know that I have an allergy. When I'm hot and I've been working all day and I have an ice cold beer in a big glass, right? A big one. And I'm like, gulp, 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 gulp. Oh, wow. That's great. I feel wonderful. Not me. I'm actually more thirsty after having that beer, that alcohol. Whereas the guy next to me, most of the guys next to me are like, wow, that's good. Let's go home to the family. I'm like, all right, but let's have one more. So I have this physical allergy to alcohol. And now that I know that, I'm not really ashamed of it at all. And if there's anything, I'd like people to know that there's an allergy. And just by the definition, man, if you drink a beer and you're thirsty when you're done, then you're not the same as most of the people. They right. usually drink a beer and they're not thirsty. Right. Now it's different than drinking, partying and whatever. But so once I didn't realize that till later in life. So through the band, we had breweries sponsoring us. We had kegs in the buses. We had, the amount of alcohol that we had in the touring band. We do 100 dates a year. I was in a different every night. So no matter how stupid I did something, I was in a brand new start the next day. It was, it was a whole nother lifestyle. And then first baby came along. And it was like, I can't go, this kid's not even going to know who I am. And when I get home, I need like 3 or 4 days of silence to just adjust from the road to a house. So it didn't work. So I stopped, kept drinking beers, of course, but I also worked in the recording studios. So I worked my way up from a intern at Skunk Records in Southern California. It was Sublime's record label. I was so happy. It was like, yes. So I worked my way up from an intern, like stuffing CDs and doing that, to becoming a mastering engineer for Sony Super Audio. So it was like, I worked at a studio. Eminem recorded 8 Mile there. These just superstars, right? So I was around superstars, and around superstars, I was around a lot of drugs and around a lot of alcohol, and sessions would start, I'd get there early in the morning before the lights are on, set up, and then we'd go until they're done. So it could be 16-hour sessions every day. So I quickly realized that wasn't going to work with the baby. It just doesn't work.
Right.
I found that artistic side of me is very selfish and very self-centered. It's 100% nobody bother me. Don't make any noise around me. I'm creating. And I felt entitled to be able to do so. So I stopped doing music in total. And then my dad invited me to move from Boulder, Colorado at the time, to move to Canada and start a winery with him. And it was like, I don't know anything about wine, man. No, I'm drinking a Bud Light right now.
Right.
Yeah. So after a couple months, we're like, yeah, let's do it. We'll go to Canada. We'll live in what is a picker shack. It was like a little house on the property. He had his house and then he had an extra house for the workers. We lived in there. And on the way up, I made flashcards because I was like, in recording, you got to know the etiquette, you got to know the language and the vibe to be able to get in, to be able to work with the pros. So with the wine, I just made flashcards and I bullshitted my way right through the wine business. And I could talk all the talk before I even saw my first bottle of wine. Yeah, I literally had 300 flashcards, and I learned terroir. I knew everything. My name was Anthony Wynn Lewis. So I got into the wine business. I was scared because I'd never driven a tractor. You know, I didn't know how to do any. And now I well versed in all machinery, but like putting in irrigation, you know, and all that. It was like, I don't even know how to do any of this. But
you were a city boy.
I was a city boy. I was a pretty city boy with like 14 mohawks in his day. Right. So like I was not digging the holes in the dirt. But then I got into that. And within the first year, I mean, I'm such I don't know the right word, but just such an egotistic, narcissist, self-centered piece of junk, man. I was. That's how I used to act. So I wound up being on the cover of like Vineyard magazine, and I wound up speaking at Cornell College, and I wound up having friends in UC Davis that were their professors. Like I faked it all the way to everybody believed, and then we were like patenting the world's first above ground grape growing trellis, and it was like, what, dude, I just got here and I'm already like a rock star in this game. So after that, you know, six months, that's all it was, 9 months. And I was like flying around talking on viticulture. I was speaking at UC British Columbia. I was, you know, it was ridiculous. I made my way onto the Economic Development Commission for British Columbia, and all this stuff, all to do with grapes. And it was all fake. But at the same time, I really knew that shit. I did. I really knew it. And it was because I faked it that I knew it. So I could hang out with all these viticulture guys. And I had like dudes that, if you're into viticulture, which like you got to be kind of nerdy to be into that stuff. But if you were, it's like I can call dudes that you can't. And it's unfair. I get it, man. I know you've been in this for generations, building your Mosel grapevines and all that shit. I just got here, and yeah, I'm talking to homie right now, and he'll pick up. So that's what got me into winemaking. And in winemaking, I realized the money in grapes. So that's what really, my dad and I, he was a normal dad growing up until I was around 10. That's when he became like an entrepreneur and started his own business. But he used to work at a bank, and he was just a normal dad. And then he decided to be an entrepreneur, and he worked his ass off until I was like 28. This was right at the time when I moved to go do the wine thing. He did an IPO, like his company went public, and he became a millionaire like that fast, like overnight. Bought a house in the Cayman Islands, bought a plane, bought a ski chalet, bought a place in Canada. Like his whole life changed overnight. So he's in the Cayman while I'm doing the vineyard work, you know. He was there sometimes, but I was digging 9,000 holes and with all the guys and all that shit. So I realized, I was like, Dad, we're never going to make any money at this wine thing because everybody else's grapes are cheaper. And if you look at this economics behind it, it costs the same amount of money to farm 40 acres, as it does 10 acres. And we have 10 acres. So the only way for us to compete with the rest of these guys is to buy 30 more acres. The problem is these guys got their acres 2 generations ago.
Right.
We bought our acres at like $10 million. It was like, you know, it was like $200,000 an acre. So it was like, Dad, we need 30 more acres. And he's like, not a chance, buddy. We're not buying that much grapes and all that shit, because it takes the same one tractor for 10 acres as it does for 40 acres. It
Right.
takes 10 guys to prune as it does 40 or whatever. So the economies of scale. So he's like, we got to make wine. And I was like, yes, we do. We're going to figure it out. And he's like, you don't know how. And I was like, no, I don't, but I'll figure it out. So I started calling the viticulture dudes that were super pro. Like, I won't name drop, but they're rad dudes, right? They're so pro. They get called like to different vineyards and they get like thousands of dollars an hour for consulting, and they're super rad. So I'm like, dude, I got to figure out how to make wine. They're like, oh, no problem. Call Katy Perry or this person. And I call them, and literally I call the Chateau Saint Michel is the big winery. And I call, and I got the head winemaker. And I'm like, yeah, Richard told me to give you a call. I'm starting to make wine in Canada. She's like, oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, okay. So what kind of grapes are you working with? And I'm like, I got some white grapes and some red grapes. We're growing, you know, this, that, and the other. And she's like, okay, take your grapes and let me know what the pH is and the TA and stuff. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. And she's like, you need to Google that shit, figure it out, and let me know. So then I learned what pH was and what TA was. And then she'd say, okay, now try and increase the pH by doing it, this blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, fuck, I don't know how to do that. I had a blender, grapes from Costco in the middle of winter in Canada. And I'm like trying to do this shit. And I'd be like, Dad, we need this pH reader. He's like, cool, Amazon. Dad, we need this like titrator. Dad, we need this. And we wound up building this fantastic lab that looked like a recording studio to me. It was like super rad. And I just nerded out and I learned how to do everything. And then she was kind of fucking with me. She'd be like, all right, raise the pH and the TA at the same time. And she knew that you couldn't do it, but there was a loophole and I figured out how to do it. And she was like, what the hell that? And so we started a really good relationship. And then I started working with other wineries, and I'd just go in and be like, hey, yeah, I'm Tony. I'm the winemaker for Vibrant Vine. Can I speak with the owner? And they'd be like, oh, the winemaker's here. And I got to talk with them. I'd never made wine in my life, you know, but then I could name drop this lady that was helping me, and that got me that person. And then my lab became like my ticket. It was like, I can do lab analysis on wine, everything on the thing I can do. I know how to do it. And not very many other people know how to do that. So I started taking samples of other wineries and doing the full analysis and giving it for free. And they were like, shit, wow, blah, 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 you know? And that's how I built relationships in the wine business. And I was drinking like a fish. I mean, I had like 30 ferments going, you know, all tanks and shit. And I had to sample them. And I was a judge for the Vintners Quality Alliance. So I'd take like 20 Sauvignon Blancs, and you got to divide them into the best one, the worst one, and everything in between. And then you go on to all the whites and then all the reds. And this is what I did. I drank from 7 a.m. till I passed out at night every day. That was my job. So I got lucky. Some crazy shit happened. I'll give you, this is the last one, but this is crazy. Okay. So I only hire musicians because I'm like, if I can learn this shit, anybody can learn it. So I hire Mandy from Walmart. She's the greeter. Ted, he's the plumber from Home Depot, the plumbing department. And Chris, he's a guitar player in a reggae band, and all these guys. And I have all these musicians making wine with me. And we're like the punk rock winery, you know, because we're making good wine. And, you know, even the pricing of my wine was so just my dad. It was like, Dad, I got to make a lot of money. Canada costs a lot to live here, bro. It's like $9 for a breakfast burrito, you know? And he's like, okay, well, how much do you need? And I was like, I need like $100,000. He's like, phew. Well, how much wine do we have? I was like, we got like 7,000 bottles. He's like, okay, well, 7,000 Tuesday. You need to charge $30 per bottle. I'm like, okay. How much is everybody else's wine? $17. Ours is 30. Okay. And then like things, like a few other things happened. It was like, to make white wine, we found out, my dad, I was like, yeah, we got to buy all these tanks. It's like $300,000. He's like, cool, that's a lot of money. Can we rent them? I was like, I don't know. Can we rent them? He's like, sure. Rent them. How much is it? He's like, $300 a month. He's like, okay. How long does it take to make white wine? It's like 3 months. My dad's like, dude, $1,000 a tank? Fuck yeah, get them. So we put them in his garage and we outsourced the crushing of the grapes to a winery. So we didn't have to buy a $200,000 press. We didn't have to get 3-phase power. We didn't have to get cooling systems or nothing. We just rented the tank and fermented on site. And then we bottled at other places and we really outsourced the business. It was like, I learned so much from my dad by just his gut was just like, well, just don't spend the money. Yeah, cool. But just do it a different way. And
Right.
he gave me that resourcefulness that I have now. So I'm drinking a lot. Okay. I'm telling you, I'm drinking a lot. And, we mess up bottles. We're shrink wrapping, but we did so much. It's impossible to tell you the story over this one call, but we make these bottles and then we mess them up. It's got my brother's psychedelic art on them. They're called the Vibrant Vine out of British Columbia, and they're ridiculous. Okay. Ridiculous. We make these bottles and we give people 3D glasses. They put them on and the bottles in 3D. And like, we're like the Antichrist to the sophisticated wine business. Right. And, our bottling, the shrink wrap company that makes the shrink wrap goes, we want to enter your bottle in a competition in Switzerland, beverage packaging. And it's like Budweiser and Coca-Cola and shit. We got bronze fucking medal, right? It was like, wow, that's amazing.
That is cool.
The next year he's like, yeah, we want to enter the same thing. And I was like, cool, Ted, send him the bottles that he needs. Ted's like, all right, I'm on it. He sends them the bottles, but to export wine into Switzerland from Canada, you have to have a representative in Switzerland, and you have to have a license and this exporting thing, and it's a huge deal, and it costs like $1,000. So Ted did all that. Never told him to. I thought he was going to send him 2 empty bottles, FedEx or whatever, right? But he sent an entire case of wine to Geneva, Switzerland, legally, and it's there. And the guy's got it. He gets the 2 bottles. He puts them in the competition, and it wins gold.
Wow.
Gold, best packaging. And what it is our old fucked up labels that had a little slit in the back that we couldn't use. So we put them on upside down on the bottle and we called it Oops. And it was, I can't not finish this one. It's a good one, I promise. So in winemaking, I made a bunch of wine my first vintage. And I flushed the lees down the toilet, basically. Like I just flushed it down into our septic tank of the house, and I clogged the septic tank, and it was a disaster. And I was like, damn it. So those are the lees. And basically winemaking is about making grape juice, and then it settles the must or the lees at the bottom, like miso soup. You stir up miso soup, and then it settles. Same as winemaking. You just don't want to oxidate it or have bad shit happen. So it settles, and then you take the clear wine and you rack it into a new wine tank and you discard the sediment, right? And I was flushing that down the toilet, thousands and thousands of gallons, and it clogs your toilet. So don't use it in a normal septic tank. And so the next year I was like, we quadrupled production, and it was like, I can't do that again. I'll put them in plastic tanks out back and deal with it later. So this Oops wine, this is totally 100% true story. All the lees that I'd filled these 1,000-liter plastic tote tanks with like metal cages on them, there's 6 or 7 of them in the back. I had taken the lees out of our good wine and dumped it in those tanks and put the cap on and left it. It froze over the winter. I did nothing to that. Okay. Sitting out there, and it's like Gewürztraminer, Pinot Blanc, Chardonnay, Riesling, Pinot Noir. It's every white wine that I make in there, the lees, the garbage. So it starts to settle, right? And over 6 months of it being out there, it's settled, packed hard, and it's beautiful, clear liquid. And I'm like, it smells, kind of like eggs because it's got sulfur in it. So Ted takes a glass and tastes amazing, man. I was like, no way, it smells terrible. So he's like, no, it smells great, or it tastes great. I taste it. I'm like, wow, it's super complex. It's like crazy awesome. Not everybody's going to like it unless you have somewhat of a developed palate. But so what we do is we rack it off of the lees off of the lees, and we splash rack it. So we're just like splashing it all over to aerate it to get rid of the egg smell. And then we package it and we put it in with the leftover bottles upside down, and we call it Oops. And that's the thing, right? So we finished it, and we were selling it for like $12 a bottle, super cheap in the wine shop. And you could only buy a case because it was our garbage wine. We just sell it fast. So it went to Geneva, Switzerland. It went to the World Beverage Packaging Competition. It wins gold. And they're like, whoa, they were so happy because they made the wrapper. And they were like, Tony, the World Wine Competition in Geneva, Switzerland is right down the street. And you have 10 extra bottles. All you need is 2 bottles to enter the competition. It's $1,000 or something. And I'm like, no way, $1,000, not going to do it. And I talked to my dad and he's like, dude, we should do it because then we could say was entered in the World Wine Competition, right? Just put the sticker on the bottle. And we're like, it's a great idea. Let's do it. $1,000. We get a call back a week later. You won double platinum, best white wine in the fucking world in 2013, 10,000 entries, double blind, taste tested. You're the winemaker of the year. Or whatever.
My God.
Like, what the? So it comes out in the newspapers and everything in our town. And there's like a line of people at our wine shop. And I'm just thinking like, oh, dude, did I do something illegal? What happened? And my dad's like, and people are just coming in to buy the wine. And then everything changed. We went from like 500 cases to, I don't know what it is now, like 70,000 cases.
Wow.
It went crazy. Like 10 employees to a lot, tripled the size of the building. Like it became a machine. But at that time I'd really started drinking and, another person in my life started drinking and, I went to Mexico and I came back and it was like, that was it. I hit that moment, that moment that was just like, that's enough. I can't take another second of this life. I can't do it anymore. And I took her to rehab and it was hardcore, man. I had 2 kids at the time and, drop at rehab. And it was like horrible because I didn't know anything about alcoholism. I didn't know anything about drug addiction. I didn't know anything because my whole life was like, drugs are awesome. Drinking wine all day is great. Those are the people and environments I was around. So it had really became a problem. So then my wife went to rehab and then I was on my own with the kids and I came and I was going to get a divorce and everything. And I came and the counselor sat me down, with my wife there and I have the divorce papers. I'm ready to go. Like, you're the problem, you are the problem. As soon as you're gone, my life will be okay. And she goes, yeah, that's fine. We'll get to the divorce in a second. Don't worry about it. So how was your day? And like, the day was fine. Got the kids to school, whatever, made lunches and did my work and everything's fine. She's like, oh, okay. So do you drink? I was like, yeah, I also worked at a brewery and a distillery. I drink wine, and she's like, oh, how much do you drink? And I was like, I drink at dinner for sure. A couple glasses though, like 2 glasses at dinner. Sure. Yeah. Honestly, like a bottle, but like 2 glasses. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And do you drink during the day at all? Well, at lunch, I usually have to meet the sommelier or something and like show him my wine and I'll have a glass or 2 at lunch. Okay. So like 4 glasses a day kind of thing. Yeah. Yeah. And then, so you're a winemaker. Yeah. So you taste wine. Yeah. Yeah. I taste wine. I spit sometimes, usually. And she's like, oh, well, how many tastings do you do a day? And I'm like 30 or 40, like I gotta go to my winery. I gotta go to my friend's winery. I gotta do that. I gotta do the lab. I gotta taste. I gotta do that. She's like, oh, so like 30, 40 tastings a day. I'm like, yeah, probably like 80. And then, so that's it. That's all you drink. And what about the weekends and stuff? I'm like, yeah. I usually get a 6-pack of beer, I would get an 8-pack, so she's like, so you drink kind of like 4 or 5 glasses of wine every day. And then you drink beers. And then what about, spirits? And I was like, yeah, I love cognac. It's like my thing. It's the most sophisticated drink. I drink cognac. My business partner does. We have fancy bottles and we taste all the time. And, oh, so how much cognac do you drink a day? I'm like, yeah, at least one cognac a day. Okay. And then what about anything else? And like, yeah, sometimes, if I go like skiing or something, I drink Jägermeister or this. And then she's like, well, do you think it's kind of a problem? And I was like, yeah, I do. And she's like, do you think you'd be happier if you didn't drink? And I was like, yeah, I do think I would. And then she's like, well, what are you going to do about it? And I was like, I'm going to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I said that. And once it came out of my mouth, the first time I said that was in 4th grade in California. I got moved from third grade to 5th grade. They skipped 4th grade for me. They thought I was smart. And the kids, one of the football players had just gone to Alcoholics Anonymous, and it was a big thing in California. It was like, wow, it was in publicity. So I stood up in 5th grade as the new little kid and said, "My name's Tony, I'm an alcoholic," and everybody laughed. And this was the next time I said it, and I was 38 years old, and I said, "I'm going to go to Alcoholics Anonymous," and she said, "Okay, cool. Maybe we'll see you tomorrow." And I was like, "All right, see ya." And I left that appointment and I went there, and I went to an Alcoholics Anonymous. I called the phone number and they said there was like a meeting across from this place in the basement. And I go in and I'm just like, this is not for me. I've got $1,000 suit on. These are not my people. And then I went to 100 meetings in 30 days.
Wow.
And I got sober. And that was 6 years ago. Just a couple days ago, 6 years ago. I haven't had a drink since. And yeah, everything changed at that point in my life. My wife got sober there. And we came to Nicaragua 2 years after that.
So, I have a special date that I want to ask you about. So let's talk about Valentine's Day, 2022.
Right.
It was kind of a very, very pivotal point in your life.
Right. It is. So even though I hit a pretty hard bottom, in my opinion, like, from having an allergy of drinking, so I'm the guy that always has another one, right? Well, that leads to what some people might call an inventory, like rocks in a backpack, where it's like, "Ooh, I did that, and I'm ashamed of that," right?
Mm-hmm.
And time goes by, and that's still in my backpack, and I'm carrying it around. And I did that, and I drove drunk, and like pretty much every time I drove, I was drinking because I drank all day. So like I had this inventory of times that I'd put people at risk, at times I'd said inappropriate things, at times I'd just been stupid, and acted selfish, and that stuff. So I went through a process where I got to face those and make peace with them. Mm-hmm. So I'm actually not ashamed of any of the stuff that I've done. I've done some crazy stuff that it's amazing that I'm alive and that I didn't hurt anybody else in the process. But those are all assets to me that I can share with other people that need it. Mm-hmm. When somebody needs to hear that they're not the only one that did that stuff, I can say it. And I know that they're tools for me to help others. So I'm not ashamed of anything that I've done. And I've kind of peace with it. So Valentine's Day, I was never able to hit a rock bottom, right? Because I always had a mother-in-law or father-in-law or somebody that would pay my bill when I couldn't pay my bill. So in Nicaragua, people were supporting me without having a real job, and they were paying the bills, and I wasn't able to hit that rock bottom that I needed to hit. So the other person in my life wasn't able to stay sober. I still go to a meeting every single day, 7 days a week at 7 a.m. I'm busy. I'm on the phone doing my meeting, and it's worked for me for 6 years.